Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I am privileged to welcome a very senior corporate leader and a friend from California, USA, Mr. Sridar Iyengar. Sridhar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. Mr. Iyengar is the co-founder of 360 Plus Foundation. And in his own words, he's a mentorpreneur. He's the former chairman of ICICI Ventures, and he's the earlier managing partner of KPMG. So, Sridhar, before we talk about two areas that we discussed, one was to manage India's human and intellectual capital, and the second was work-life balance. Tell me about your own amazing journey in brief.
I consider myself as one of the freedom generation. I was born 2 days before independence, and I think the British decided to leave when I was born.
Yeah.
So I was born with a sense of hope, a sense of what India could be at that time, and that was the part of our entire generation was like that. So, I went to school in Calcutta. I was born in Calcutta. I went to school in Calcutta. I did my BCom honors at St. Xavier's College in Calcutta. And then I was trying to decide what to do, whether I should do more further studies or whether I should move on. And I thought that having spent, nearly 15, 16 years studying, that I perhaps should move on. So I decided to accept articles, for chartered accounting in Manchester, England. So I went and joined KPMG or Pete Marwick Mitchell in those days. And I was there and, I did audits. Then when they wanted to start a new tax division, they put me in charge of that, at least for the Northwest. And it's something I will want to keep coming back to, Ashutosh, is I get bored very quickly. Mm-hmm. So unless I get new stimulus in either a job or whatever I do, I start to move on. And fortunately, KPMG allowed me to move on from the audit side to tax side.
Yeah.
And I made it partner pretty quickly, within 9 years of starting my career at KPMG.
Wow.
And that, to a certain extent, also led me to 6 years later to say, what next? Now that I've done this, what next can I do? And that's when I decided to sort of demote myself to a certain extent and went to the US firm as a manager. Gave up my partnership in the UK, went to the US firm as a manager in San Francisco. And I knew I would make it back to partner, which I did, And I did that job, which is basically running our international services practice out of San Francisco. And then when India opened up, I'd never done anything with India. I'd done a lot of things with China, but joint ventures and stuff. When India opened up, I expressed an interest and I became the firm's go-to person for India.
Right.
The US firm's representative for their interest, because they had a lot of large companies, whether it was Pfizer, the bank, Citibank, all of them had US connections. So I went on the board of the Indian company after the British and the Middle East firm had started it and helped that company. And then 3 years later, volunteered to become their CEO.
Wonderful.
And so left the US, came to India for 3 years. And that's where I built my entire relationship.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And as they say, the rest is history.
Yes, and I think when I came back, after having run India and those years, as you know, this was the turn of the century. It was very, very exciting. I could not see me continuing in a normal job in the US. So very soon after that, I left the firm. I took early retirement. They did give me an opportunity to start my own operation, to take the BPO part of KPMG public as a separate company in which KPMG would be ended. But when .com crash, that idea sort of faltered, and I decided to take early retirement.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sridhar, you've spent a lot of time leading large organizations in India, And for a long time, we've all been told that India's demographic profile is India's demographic dividend, our young population. So I want to focus my conversation with you today around India's human and intellectual capital. My next step question for you is, what key steps should organizations take to turn India's natural advantages into tangible benefits, especially when it comes to human capital development?
I think it's very simple. When you got the inventory of talent that India has in a very young country, huge numbers of people, maybe from last count, I believe about 60% of them below the age of 35.
Correct.
And so you've got to see how you can utilize that. Because the rest of the world, at least the other parts of the world, is getting old. And so these young people, so there's both what I would call a benefit as well as a sort of a drag in some ways, that you've got to make sure that these young people are skilled, learning the things which are going to be new in the world, and then are used to, both entrepreneurially and other things, invent things. And that's where I think India's main challenge has been, is that maybe whilst we have grown the knowledge economy in a big way, it has not reached all sections of the community that it could have. And we've still got a lot of young people still probably doing suboptimal work.
Right.
And how do we tap into the brains and the talents of those people? I think is going to be India's big challenge in the next, at least for the next decade.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah. And, I was reading some of your articles and, of course, your blogs, which seem to have a large following. You've spoken about the duality of India being both a first world and a third world country. How can Indian companies bridge this gap to fully leverage the nation's intellectual capital?
Yeah, if you travel physically, when you travel, and I've been traveling to India because as I was sitting on so many boards, I was coming to India pretty much, every month or every other month, and you can see both of these worlds existing side by side in all our major cities.
Absolutely.
So to me, I think the challenge will be to integrate that. And as I said, it is the bottom of the pyramid, which C.K. Prahlad, who was like my guru, whom I traveled with quite a lot, used to say that if we tap into that and convert that and get the benefit of those people now participating in this new economy and everything else, then that will be the biggest boon for India. And also, the development in India, when I noticed it, and we used to travel around when I was involved with TIE, that there are really two Indias within India itself.
Correct.
There is the South, which is a lot more sort of education and knowledge based than parts of the North. But the majority of the population is in the North. How do you tap into and convert those people into the knowledge economy of the future? That I think is going to be the challenge, and I think steps are being taken to address that.
Well said. And my next question, and you've partly answered it, is that what are some of the challenges India faces to develop its intellectual capital for global competitiveness? Because on the one side, we see, and as you say very rightly, there are two Indias. On the one side, major Silicon Valley or US companies are being run by Indians. On the other side, there's a constant talk of not enough jobs.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, I've been reading is that at one time there was an aspiration to go overseas. Now, if I was living in India today, would I have taken the step to go to the UK first and then come to the US? Or would I say, hey, there's enough opportunities in India for somebody with my liking for new startups and stuff? Would I have stayed behind? So to a certain extent, I'm hopeful that the newer generations will be actually able to, and we've seen benefits of that in the kind of entrepreneurial successes which various Indian companies have had with starting new things.
Right.
So I think one thing which I would like to see India do more is not follow the Me Too. Of course, we can do the Me Too because the size of our market, of India's market, is so huge that anything which may happen everywhere else, we can perfect it with technology in a much bigger way and grow faster and bigger, So that part of it. But I'm also hopeful that we will, in fact, invent new ways of addressing old problems, in such a way that the West and the other countries will say, hey, that is what we should be adopting, Then rather than being a vendor to ideas and corporations overseas, that we will in fact be developing our own way of solving some of these problems, be it climate change, be it logistics, be it manufacturing, and do it in a way and use our intellectual talent to say, hey, we're going to be the intelligence behind the artificial intelligence, which every company will be using.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And the follow-up question to that is, how important is transparency in leadership to build trust, to maximize intellectual capital?
Absolutely essential. I think if there is any issue with any corporation, it doesn't matter where it is, it's always the leadership, which in my view has got to be the one which is both enabling and not controlling. And that's a control theme that I have tried to live by. If I had been working in a controlled environment, even in a large firm at KPMG, I was given the opportunity to go into the white spaces, And so long as I was held accountable for whatever they wanted from me, how I did it and when I did it, where I did it, was acceptable to them. And I think if we can give that feeling to workforces in India and not tell them, that, hey, because one size fits all doesn't really work. And that happens because leadership itself is not comfortable because they're so worried about failure. Whereas failure is something you should be rewarded. Saying, did you learn from that failure? In which case, forgiven, and give the person the chance to correct it because he or she has learned from doing that. And that, I think, is culturally, I don't know, Ashutosh, you may know this better. I don't know whether that is acceptable. In a lot of large corporations, the mid-management level is very risk averse. And what they do is whatever goals they are given, they divide it by the number of people below them and say, okay, I've been given a goal of 100. I've got 50 people. Each one of you will do 2.
Yeah.
Whereas what it should be is like a cricket or football team or whatever it is. You do 5, the other person will do 1, which is equally important, rather than this expectations of all our people that they should be the same.
Great observation. Wonderful. You also emphasized in one of your blogs and your articles the importance of training and skill building. How should corporates and governments collaborate to upskill the workforce?
I think the first thing we've got to teach people is not, I take the word away. I'm very, very careful not to use the word teach. We've got to teach people how to learn rather than teach them something. So our education system or our training that we do in corporates has got to switch itself to saying, here is an issue. How would you solve it? And as a result of that, find a different methodology, because each one will come with it from a slightly different angle and perspective. And I think we've got to encourage that. And that's why I go back to the first point. That only depends upon how comfortable the leadership is with uncertainty. Uncertainty is a given. You can't avoid uncertainty. So how do you get your people to, in fact, anecdotally, when my daughter is my conscience, I remember once telling her when she was still in 6th or 7th grade, I said, do this. She said, why should I, why? So I said, because I'm telling you. She said, that's not a good enough answer. Unless you explain to me why I should do it and why I should do it this way, then I can. Because otherwise, just telling me, is not enough.
Absolutely.
So make people think. That's the most important aspect.
Wonderful. And how do you envision India's knowledge economy growing? And, you've been associated with the knowledge economy throughout your career. And what sectors do you believe will lead the change?
To quote either, Steve Jobs or Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, again, Wayne Gretzky said, you have got to go where the puck will be rather than the puck is now.
Correct.
And Steve Jobs said something like, you can't connect the dots, going forward. Everybody connects the dots going backwards and see a linear growth. Whereas to go forward, you've got to think about all of these things and what would you like? Because the world is going to be created by these new ideas, And I think if we can capture that, so I am very much for disruption and change.
Absolutely.
Even, just to actually, if it's this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is in my view anathema. If it ain't broke, please break it, because what you will make out of the same pieces might be very different to what it was before. And that is what I think we should be encouraging, both at corporates, in our education system. Please,
well said.
Disrupt it.
Yeah. And I'm a complete believer in disruption myself. I agree.
In fact, if you go on my profile, I actually use a word, is have a healthy disrespect for authority.
Absolutely.
Don't take authority. Just because somebody is more senior than you doesn't mean that they know any more than you. Absolutely. They've got different experiences.
Absolutely. Very well said. Sridhar, you've also written about breaking the do as you're told mentality that you've just spoken about. And yet, in Indian companies where you've led large teams, you've sat on so many boards, the general mentality is to follow the herd. How can Indian organizations, or how can large organizations foster a culture of empowerment and creativity?
I think, as I said, first of all, there should be a cadre of leadership. In fact, at KPMG in the UK, I did a lot of orientation of newcomers who joined the firm. I would actually be in the car. And one of the things, and I hope this is acceptable, the language I'm going to use, our group used to use a Latin phrase called nil desperandum carborandum. Didn't mean anything in Latin, actually. It doesn't mean anything. But somebody would say, what does that mean? He says, don't let the bastards grind you down. Is that you have got to challenge. You've got to, the way to learn, and in fact, when I used to do the work, I would say that, as a supervisor, your job is not to find things which a person does and say, oh, look, I am a supervisor. Look, I found something error. What you should be rewarded for and feel good about is when they come back, because you've given them enough information and guidance up front. So when they do it right the first time, that's what you should be rewarded for, And I think this is culturally quite difficult in the Far East to a large extent, is to feel that, the people, if so long as they get it done, give them the encouragement to do it. And if they fail, help them not to make the same mistake. It's like a Silicon Valley, phenomena, is that failure is actually, VCs will say, oh, you failed once, I'm sure you won't fail for that reason. So actually, you're a better bet for me to invest in you.
Correct. Absolutely right. But given the vast experience you have across the world, do you see this kind of do as you're told mentality more prevalent in Asia, India, Southeast Asia as compared to the US and the West?
Yeah, because I think that, our respect for, elders and everything else to a certain extent large. And I think the two can sit side by side. But it first of all requires the first movement to come from the elders themselves. They have got to have a permissive way of dealing with these people. And if organizations allowed more permissiveness in the way they do it, and then change their thing, because otherwise you take away all the initiative from the people, and you reward them for tasks,
Correct.
rather than getting some things done, maybe differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have time for one more question for you. How do you see the future of corporate India transitioning from hierarchical models to more community-driven knowledge-sharing organizations?
I think that, the people really, again, at the top, and more importantly, re-educating the middle management of these large corporations, because generally the CEOs know exactly what they want, but it's a way in which what they want is translated to the people at the bottom end of the thing is where the things go wrong. I would say the way to do it is to actually be more inclusive, like, perhaps more involvement of senior people with the people at the bottom, whether it's through volunteer programs, community programs, where they come, take any opportunity to cut the hierarchy away. If there is an office cricket team, participate in that. Be the umpire if you can't play. Do something where you are seen as being approachable and friendly, at all levels. And if you can take that mystique of authority away from the people, I will guarantee you that the young people will shine much, much better, because they now feel that there is somebody who will be fighting their corner at all times, rather than be just a judge and a jury.
Correct. Yeah. So one more question, and I want to, given the large number of people who will listen to your and my conversation, and given the amazing success you have had, what would you say are 3 lessons from your journey that you would want a lot of our viewers and listeners to take away?
The lessons I would say is, and again quoting, I rely on these one-liner thing. My uncle once told me when I left India, he said that, look, in Sridhar, in life, you can't do whatever you like, but you must always like what you do. So whatever your job is, even if you're going to give a task-driven job or someday do this, do it well. First of all, that's what I'm saying, that whatever is given to you, do it well, give it your best.
Yeah.
The second thing is, in small ways, even in anything you do, bring a part of you into that in some way, that you've done it slightly differently, which might then be adopted as the way in which it should be done in the future. And more importantly, tasks generally achieve a particular objective. But I very much believe that the world is connected. Everything is connected. I'm a big fan of Freakonomics, that something which is happening somewhere has an impact.
Absolutely.
And if you, in doing the way it is, can actually address some other thing which your work has done. So I would say always, and most importantly, if I can add a fourth,
have fun. Sorry?
Have fun. Have fun doing it. If it becomes a task and you're bored and you don't enjoy waking up in the morning and going to work, don't go. Look for a new job.
Absolutely. But on that note, Sridhar, I just want to say, with your three amazing lessons of do it well, bring a part of you in whatever you do, help others. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. You must have been one of the early few people who left this country and made such a big success wherever you went. We covered a reasonable amount of distance on managing human capital, managing intellectual capital out of India. I think a lot has been achieved, but a lot more needs to be done. The fact that people like you are in such powerful roles and positions around the world says a lot about our own education system and your own drive.
Yeah. No, I would say that, look, India to me was the time I spent in India, the 5 years or 6 years, of which 3 years I was on site, were most probably the best years of my life, because I was working with a bunch of people who, like I was born in the independence generation, they were the millennial generation in a way, because they were turn of the century. Yeah. I was there from 2000 to 2002. I think there was something which made them, for a lot of them, it was their first job. They felt that, it was an empowered group, and that they were doing something, which was new and very, very exciting. So, in fact, one issue that we were going to talk about, and I'm saying, if I may add that, the whole question of work-life balance, I think it's a question of definition.
Correct.
That you have got to basically make sure that the work you do is not become your life. And that, I think, is the way to say that, look, I'll hold something back. I'll have other interests, and that I will have. Most people make the work the excuse to not do other things and say, oh, I'm too busy at work.
Yeah.
What you've got to do is there is something else which you should be doing. But also at the same time, make sure that when you are at work, concentrate on work, but also take some time off in between, have time off for yourself and
Absolutely.
to do
other. Absolutely. No, we had a lot of questions planned to discuss with you on work-life balance, but unfortunately, the clock was not being very friendly with. Okay. But I will schedule another conversation sometime in the next few months to talk about work-life balance. It's such an important aspect, and not just work-life balance, but how important it is for each one of us to be able to develop interests, relationships, networks, friends beyond our work.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think, if you, like I learned from my father, again, family, my father, when he ceased to become the office manager at Tisco and had to retire, he felt that somehow his life was, what do I do? Yeah. His entire life was thinking in terms of doing that job, as opposed to he had developed no other interests.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, we must discuss that. But thank you today for speaking to me about human capital and intellectual capital. And we'll talk again. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Astor. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.